Organizations operate in a complex and uncertain environment, and in trying to cope with this complexity, they often become complex themselves. This internal complexity creates additional uncertainty, adding to the external uncertainty they face. When confronted with uncertainty, people seek more information. When confronted with complexity, they perform more analysis. Meetings proliferate and decisions are delayed. Frontline employees become frustrated by the lack of decision-making, while those at the top become frustrated by the apparent lack of action, despite high levels of activity. More initiatives are launched, increasing activity levels. This leads to increased confusion, as there is much to do but uncertainty about what will have the greatest impact and who should be responsible. Accountability becomes diffuse, leading to the proliferation of controls. This slows things down and restricts frontline decision-making. Attempts to increase clarity result in actions being specified in more detail, leading to cynicism and frustration. Trust erodes. The cycle is toxic. Execution versus mere activity. Generating activity is not a problem, it is easy. The ease of generating activity makes solving the real problem, getting the right things done, harder. The challenge is to achieve the things that matter, the things that will have an impact, and the things a company needs to succeed. High activity levels often disguise a lack of effective action. Quantity is mistaken for quality, and adding more activity only worsens the problem. Predictable versus unpredictable environments. In a stable and predictable environment, it is possible to make good plans by gathering and analyzing information. We can learn enough about the external world and our position in it to set objectives. We can predict the effects of our actions well enough to achieve these objectives and use supervision, controls, and incentives to ensure people do what is needed. We can measure results until the desired outcomes are achieved. In an unpredictable environment, this approach quickly falters. The longer and more rigorously we persist with it, the more quickly and completely things will break down. 3 principles for ensuring alignment. Decide what really matters. Do not attempt to create perfect plans. Use accessible knowledge to determine the outcomes you want the organization to achieve. Formulate your strategy as an intent rather than a detailed plan. Get the message across. Communicate what matters most and delegate responsibility for executing the plan. Keep it simple and focus on intentions, explaining what you want people to achieve and why. Ask them to share how they plan to achieve these outcomes. Give people space and support. Encourage people to adapt their actions to achieve the overall intention as they observe what is happening. Provide broad boundaries for decision-making and action. Part 2. Why look for inspiration from military history? Studying military history helps identify essential principles that can be applied in business contexts. The military faced acute strategy execution problems in the 19th century, long before similar issues became prominent in business. The military's extensive experience in dealing with these problems is well documented and accessible, providing valuable lessons. The term strategy originates from the Greek word strategos, meaning a military commander. While business is not war, military experience offers insights into principles that enable large organizations to achieve their goals in complex, uncertain, and fast-changing environments. Friction and its application to business. Clausewitz observed that executing strategy is difficult due to friction, a concept he developed to explain the challenges armies face. Friction arises when individuals with independent wills strive to achieve a collective purpose in a fast-changing, complex environment. This phenomenon applies to all organizational life, including business, and can never be completely eliminated, but only mitigated. Friction creates gaps in alignment. The concept of friction aligns with systems thinking and chaos theory, and is useful for managers because it describes how working in a complex adaptive system feels and how to deal with it. Sources of friction. Clausewitz identified 8 sources of friction: insufficient knowledge of the enemy, rumors and unreliable information, uncertainty about one's own strength and position, exaggeration of difficulties by friendly troops, discrepancies between expectations and reality, the inherent weakness of one's own army compared to paper strength, challenges in keeping an army supplied, and the tendency to alter or abandon plans when faced with battlefield realities. Friction is a result of our cognitive limits and the unpredictable nature of future events. Importance of clarity. Gathering more information costs money and time and slows decision-making. Providing more detail in response to a demand for clarity increases noise, making it less clear what really matters. Detailed plans are less robust because details change quickly. Part 3. Leadership with Auftragstaktik. In uncertain environments, leaders must develop a sense of what is right and issue orders, knowing that execution will be hindered by accidents and obstacles. Orders must be clear and simple, passed down through the chain of command with people in charge at all levels. Chain of command. A clear chain of command is necessary, but not sufficient. People must remain in charge, capable of acting on their own judgment when needed. Overly detailed instructions create uncertainty and friction, increasing confusion. Senior commanders should provide general orders, leaving specifics to subordinates who understand the purpose and can adapt to changing circumstances. Addressing the 3 gaps with Auftragstaktik. To close the knowledge gap, plan only what can be planned and accept uncertainty. Use available knowledge to identify essentials. For the alignment gap, use a cascade process where each level adds to the one above, all united by an understanding of higher-level intentions. Plans should be appropriate to their level, with higher levels providing general guidance and lower levels handling specifics. Bidirectional information flow. Higher levels should communicate the organization's overall situation, purpose, immediate intentions, specific roles, freedoms and constraints to lower levels. Lower levels should decide how to achieve objectives based on their specific knowledge. This approach clears space for decision-making and action at lower levels, ensuring alignment with overall goals. Autonomy and alignment. Regarding the effects gap, he encourages the use of individual initiative within boundaries and requires junior personnel to depart from the letter of their instructions if the situation demands it to fulfill the intent. Rather than tightening control, he suggests that as long as the intentions of higher levels are clear, individual initiative can be relied upon to adjust actions according to the situation. The imposed discipline of controls and sanctions is replaced by the self-discipline of responsibility. There should be no fear of punishment if a calculated risk fails to pay off. Sins of omission should be regarded as far more serious than sins of commission. Von Moltke's insight is that there is no need to choose between autonomy and alignment. He demands high autonomy and high alignment simultaneously. He realizes that the more alignment you have, the more autonomy you can grant. The one enables the other. The insight is that alignment needs to be achieved around intent, and autonomy should be granted around actions. Intent is expressed in terms of what to achieve and why. Autonomy concerns the actions taken to realize the intent, in other words, what to do and how. Resulting adaptability and self-reliance. An adaptable organization will make corrective decisions while executing, even if the overall plan is flawed. This may not guarantee a great strategy, but it makes it unlikely that the organization would head straight into disaster as the Prussian army did in 1806. By building this capability, the risks of a flawed strategy are mitigated because the intelligence of the whole organization is applied to determining how the strategy unfolds, and this process is so extended over time that it becomes practically continuous. Von Moltke effectively turned strategy development and strategy execution into a distinction without a difference. Consequently, he did not need to wait for a perfect plan. He could proceed with one that was 70% right because the organization would handle the remaining 30%. He did not need to know everything, he simply needed to be directionally correct. A short history tour of Auftragstaktik. The moral and emotional basis of Auftragstaktik was not fear, but respect and trust. Every officer had the responsibility to exercise thinking obedience and to give clear direction. Auftragstaktik recognizes that battle quickly becomes chaotic. It emphasizes independence of thought and action, stating that a failure to act or a delay is a more serious fault than making a mistake in the choice of means. In 1869, von Moltke made the distinction between an order, or Befehl, and a directive or Weisung, which entered general use. By 1877, General Meckel wrote that a directive had two parts: a description of the general situation and the commander's overall intention, and the specific task. Clarity was essential. Experience suggests that every order which can be misunderstood will be. The intention should convey absolute clarity of purpose by focusing on the essentials and leaving out everything else. The task should not be specified in too much detail. Above all, the senior commander was not to tell his subordinate how to accomplish his task, as he would if he were to issue an order. The first part of the directive was to give the subordinate freedom to act within the boundaries set by the overall intention. The intention was binding, the task was not. A German officer's prime duty was to reason why. Every unit was to have its own clearly defined area of responsibility, and the freedom of unit commanders extended to the choice of form as well as means, depending on specific circumstances. The responsibility of every officer was to exploit their given situation to the benefit of the whole. The guiding principle of action was to be the intent of the higher commander. Officers were to ask themselves, what would my superior order me to do if he were in my position and knew what I know? German Army success. In the beginning of WW2, in 1933, the German Army produced a new guide to its leadership philosophy called Truppenführung, or troop leadership, marking the next stage in the maturity of Auftragstaktik. It was issued to all officers. In it, we read, "The basis of leadership is the mission, or Auftrag, and the situation. The mission identifies the goal to be achieved and must always be the point of focus. A mission that tries to encompass multiple tasks can easily obscure what really matters. An uncertain situation is normal. It will rarely be possible to gain more accurate information about the state of the enemy. While you should obviously try to find out as much as possible, waiting for more information in a critical situation is seldom a sign of incisive leadership, and often a serious mistake. The mission and the situation lead to a decision. If the mission no longer provides a sufficient basis for action, or if it is made redundant by events, the decision must take this into account. If anyone changes a mission or does not carry it out, he must report the fact and bear responsibility for the consequences. He must always act within the framework of the whole. A decision should pursue a clear goal with all the means available. It is the resolution of the leader which carries it through. The will to succeed can in itself often bring about success. Once a decision has been made, it should only be departed from in exceptional circumstances. In the vicissitudes of war, however, sticking rigidly to a decision can also be a mistake. Part of the art of leadership is to recognize the time and circumstances in which a new decision is called for. A leader must grant his subordinates freedom of action as long as it does not compromise his intention. Failure of Auftragstaktik. Towards the end of WW2. A contributing factor to the German defeat was Hitler's contempt for the principles of Auftragstaktik and his attempts to reverse its practice, particularly on the Eastern Front from 1942 onward. The principle of trust was integral to Auftragstaktik. Hitler never trusted his generals. As long as they won battles for him, he left them alone. However, as the demands he placed on them grew and the scope of the war extended beyond Germany's ability to fight it, success faltered. As half-victories turned into defeats, his mistrust grew, leading to increased interference and micromanagement. Auftragstaktik is not popular with tyrants. From Auftragstaktik to mission command. In 1977, U.S. Army Colonel Trevor Dupuy concluded reluctantly that the German ground soldier consistently inflicted casualties at about a 50% higher rate than they incurred from the opposing British and American troops under all circumstances. This was true whether they were attacking or defending, whether they had local numerical superiority or were outnumbered, whether they had air superiority or not, and whether they won or lost. Today, the operational manuals of organizations like the U.S. Marine Corps or the British Army contain passages that could have been lifted from Truppenführung. There is a method for developing plans, breaking them down, and using them to brief subordinates. The military calls this mission analysis, which helps subordinates draw out the implications of what they have been asked to achieve. After briefings, subordinates go through a process of back-briefing their superiors to check their understanding of the intent and its implications before passing it down the line to their own subordinates in a cascade. These techniques create internal predictability, which helps when the environment is chaotic and allows scalability.